You already know that. Gina Wasabi is the other aliens that I go by. And we have I don't know, this is like the eighth episode, Marcus, of This Ain't the Show. Either which way, it'll be a lot quicker segment in regards to the culture shift we got that we're all facing right now, and how to fight smarter as opposed to just harder. Um, let's go ahead and kick off the introduction. It's John, you at the top.
Hi everyone, happy Saturday to you. I'm coming to you from sunny Los Angeles. It's about almost 4 o'clock p.m. here, and I just want to say that I'm proud to be part of this panel today. Just by way of background, I come from an agency with several letters in the name. We don't really talk about it publicly. Working in the private sector now as a criminal justice and personal protection consultant, so to speak. And then I look forward to sharing with you some details regarding what we expect to see happen in 2021.
Alrighty, right below Mr. Hemingway.
This is Mr. Hemingway, living in D.C. I'm at the other MAGA rally. I'm actually out on the street corner right now. That's pretty much it.
Cool. And the sultry, sassy Miss Hita.
Oh, it's my turn?
Yep.
Hi, you guys. This is Phil. I'm actually currently in DC right now with Marcus, and I'm enjoying myself at this point. I see a lot of action today, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more action. Proud patriot over here.
You said it, and I liked it. The A word, action, and that's exactly what we're talking about right now. Action as we're driving, action as we're in the middle of what's really going on right now with the stopping the steal and the protest and the this and the that. And so I have a clip that relates to the action that we had experienced a couple weeks ago. And John will go ahead and walk us through the legal side as far as what to do moving forward.
You guys swore an oath! Every last one of you! You swore an oath, Corral! You know you did! When it all comes down, you know you gotta decide!
Whoever got the badge
We're pissed off!
Whoever got the badges and stuff,
We're pissed off at that asshole!
you
know
send it to
man.
me.
All you guys know is
Whoever got the video
motherfucker.
of badges you can get, send it to me.
I'm glad we paid for this.
All revise the Constitution! And you guys know it. When you guys go home, remember the crazy, angry black guy who's yelling at you right now, not because I hate you. I love you fucking guys. But I need you guys to wake up. You gotta think about this. But it's okay.
We are here protesting unconstitutional lockdown on a virus that has 99.9% chance of survival. We are protesting for these lockdowns, and you are escorting the group that backed the blue. You are escorting the group.
The printed copy, just let me know.
Okay.
So I can bring it back up. No hat. I called myself wearing a sweatshirt and layers because this wintertime I don't want to get sick. But now I'm like fake me out hat because I'm running around this restaurant. And stand outside. T-shirt. You left me don't wear glasses.
No, I do. I'm a nurse. So I have to I'm blind all day at work because I can't wear contacts. So I'm literally walking around the hospital blind. I'm like,
oh, mask, glasses, combo thing is the most
nothing works. Dishwasher, soap, all that stuff doesn't work.
Thank you so much.
I'm so over this whole virus sickness. They're not saying anything other than
Go ahead, John, take over.
Yeah, I was just gonna text a message at your. So that's a very disturbing clip, Zabi, that you showed there, and that clip is representative of what we're hoping to do in 2021 in terms of helping American citizens be able to secure their First Amendment right to peaceful assembly without being harassed by law enforcement. So what I'm going to share today briefly, and I'm not going to try to I'd like to address what I've been seeing here in Los Angeles, California in general, in terms of liberal governors, liberal mayors, police chiefs. And oftentimes, police chiefs are politicians, and they've got to abide by what amounts to being the unconstitutional whims of the liberal mayors in terms of using the law enforcement community to suppress the constitutional safeguards of everyday citizens. Now, we are a group of people who love law enforcement. Some of us are from law enforcement, and so what really pains me is that during this past year, I've watched it from January through the present. I've watched the metamorphosis of law enforcement. Uh, I watched the metamorphosize into an entity that is used as another tool of suppression against the rights of U.S. citizens. And what I'm talking about is law enforcement shutting down conservative assemblies, law enforcement shutting down MAGA assemblies, law enforcement giving way too much advantage and leeway, in many cases illegally, to the radical groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and they're doing it under the penal code here in California that has to do with unlawful assembly. And so, really, what I'd like to do today is kind of give people a brief overview of what they can do to secure themselves for any future rallies. And it really comes down to working with law enforcement in advance. It's not enough as a citizen to memorize Amendments 1 to 10. You know the Bill of Rights, right? But that does you no good unless you can articulate your understanding of the Bill of Rights as it relates to other legal parameters here in California, the parameters that bound the behavior of law enforcement. So your knowledge of the First Amendment does you no good if you don't understand the relevant case law that supports your ability to express your feelings or express your political dissatisfaction. Quite honestly, your knowledge or your lacking of knowledge regarding case law with respect to the Fourth Amendment search and seizure won't protect you against an illegal arrest on the part of law enforcement. Now, there's a couple of things that you have to understand. Oftentimes, even when you're operating within your constitutional safeguards, if you're dealing with police officers who are poorly trained, poorly motivated, unsupervised, or corrupt, you're not going to win in the moment. So I always suggest that you simply cooperate and you try to seek redress after the fact through your attorney, through the city attorney, whatever the case may be. But
and for everybody watching right now, just so you're aware, I will put some inserts on there to give you the actual legal code that you can refer to throughout the actual program. So I'll put it up as John breaks it down for us. Go ahead, John.
Yes, so here in California, what I would suggest, let's say I were helping organize a rally, whether it be within the jurisdiction of LAPD or the Beverly Hills PD or Santa Monica PD. First and foremost, it's very important to understand that you've got to know their policy manual, because the only way to get the attention of law enforcement is to suggest to them that their behavior will be monitored and held against the standards illustrated within their policy manual. Then I would reach out to law enforcement early within the week during the permit application process. Treat it like a special event. In other words, you're going to send an email to the department that issues the permits for the special event. You go ahead and you copy the chief of police, or the commander for that division, and you indicate that you are looking forward to receiving a permit for the exercise of your First Amendment right to peaceful assembly. And then with that, you list some of the legal guidelines that bound law enforcement so they know that they are going to be scrutinized as well. So here in California, there are 4 penal codes that relate to law enforcement. We've got Penal Code 147, which has to do with offenses against public justice. Another Penal Code 149, unlawful beating by a police officer. Then there's a Penal Code 661, which has to do with removal from office. And then the 4th Penal Code has to do more so with corrections, but it can apply to law enforcement, which is a prohibition against cruel punishment. Now, what specifically is going to get the attention of the chief of police is if you reference Penal Code U.S. Code 18 U.S.C. 242, which is call of authority. You mention call of authority with law enforcement, and they will defecate in their pants. Why? Because 18 U.S.C. 242 call of authority is that federal statute that triggers an FBI investigation and an instance where an everyday citizen has had his constitutional safeguards trampled upon by law enforcement, whether it be false arrest, planting of evidence, If you false arrest and false imprisonment often go hand in hand, and what is happening is that U.S. citizens are being arrested falsely by law enforcement, and when they're taken by surprise, the initial resistance or shock to being taken into custody is oftentimes
Right.
misinterpreted by law enforcement intentionally as resisting arrest. Now, what's very
Right.
interesting about that is that the Ninth Circuit here in California has put out some case law recognizing that law enforcement has had a tendency to engage in the word here is provocative behavior, thereby surprising the citizen. And when the citizen has engaged in what the court calls limited resistance, meaning they're not resisting you, they're not running away, they're not throwing punches, but their
Right.
body has stiffened out of psychological shock because they're being
Right.
taken into custody. The court recognizes
Right.
that it's natural for there to be a limited resistance on the part of the citizen being taken into custody, born of the officer's provocative behavior. And the officer's
So,
provocative behavior, what's that?
John, I want to go ahead and reiterate what you're saying as far as limited, as opposed to a more of I guess a straight out resist, which now you're throwing punches and kicks and this
Yes.
type of thing.
Yes.
Two different things. Two different things.
Yeah, so limited resistance really is, imagine a dad being taken into custody at Costco because the manager, and this is a recent example, the manager called law enforcement because the child wasn't wearing a mask. So
Okay.
now law enforcement have jumped out of their vehicles, they've run into the interior, they've identified the dad, and they place hands on him, and they're either proning him on the ground or they're
Right.
repositioning him to be handcuffed, and he is shocked. He doesn't know what's going on. And that's
Sure.
because when you look at aggressive encounters between law enforcement and law-abiding citizens, oftentimes law enforcement has done a really poor job of communicating their intent. So if law enforcement had taken the time to have a brief conversation with this gentleman and explain to them, whether lawful or not, their intentions to take him into custody, that would have necessitated the need of the citizen to react in such a shocking manner where it now becomes an issue of limited resistance, and law enforcement, in an effort to protect themselves. And you'll notice that when they're taking you into custody, during an instance or during a time during which they don't have lawful authority to do so, they will
Right.
articulate for the purposes of the body-worn video, stop resisting, stop resisting. So they're setting the stage to be able to write a report or to charge you
Right.
with resisting arrest.
Okay. So look, right there. I want to go ahead and step in right there. You said a key word right there, and many of us lose sight of that. I'm definitely guilty of it at times. They are writing a report. You're already in court, whether you know it or not. As soon as this altercation happens, just as a reminder, like just automatically assume that's where it's going to happen. So they have a report to write, and also we have a report to write too. So as long as you realize the big picture in terms of your own civil rights. Now, Miss SYL, I wanted to ask you: have you seen anything like that down there in DC, or just in the past few weeks? I'm getting a bad connection on my side. John, you hear anything?
It looks like her speaker may be muted.
Yeah.
I'm
Hey.
sorry. You know what?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
had muted my mic.
Okay. That's the old mute
Can you
trick.
hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Did you catch that last question I threw at you?
Yeah, you said that have I seen any of this stuff that's going on in DC? Have I seen it in my hometown? Or are you
Yeah,
just
either at the rally today, or just in the past few weeks with these with our rallies.
well, to be honest, this is my first time actually being at a rally, so
Okay.
it was definitely interesting to me. But this is not going on in my hometown at all.
Really?
Antifa and just all this stuff
Okay.
going on. It's not going on there. So it was
Gotcha.
definitely something that was a culture shock because I was so used to just seeing it on the media and seeing it in video. So just seeing it firsthand is definitely, I definitely have a different approach on it.
Right.
So I'm actually kind of proud of myself for stepping out and coming down here and showing my support because I always had the fear of, I don't want to go there and get into no danger, but you know, like I said, me and Marcus, we actually went hand in hand with some Antifa members, and it was pretty fun.
Okay. All right. So Marcus, who got elbowed and who got crotch stop? Crotch. What's your move? The crotch punch. What do you do? Marcus left us. Man, this dude. Hey man, you got to stop
I'm
all
right
that.
here.
I don't care about no BLM or
I'm just,
Antifa. I'm trying to go ahead and help you out. Give you props about how you take care of Antifa. What? Did you leave again?
No, no,
Man.
he's listening to your audio on the
Oh,
camera there.
okay. All right. Okay, now I got it. Yeah. Okay. All
I'm
right. So,
here for you right
yeah. So, yeah, you guys got to with Antifa. Word has it on the street that I just heard.
now. Yeah, so you gotta make sure that you got your Antifa gear. Here
Uh-oh.
it is right here. Your helmet.
Oh
You
my
gotta have a
goodness.
helmet.
Are you serious?
And, so yeah, I'm serious. It's not a game. They were throwing fireworks at us. They was it was not just that. You have the regular badass kids from DC
Yeah.
who just try to opportunities that comes in and just egg things on along. But you had over like what 500 members of about 500 members of Proud Boys there this time. And not just that, it was the people too as well who was tired. They was like,
Let me
no,
beat your ass and show you how impressed you are. Let me beat your ass and tell you how impressed you are. That's how crazy that is, man. That's
but you had
that's what it is.
but you had all the Trump supporters too as well. You had all the Trump supporters too as well
Yeah.
who was right there with them. So it was about to go down real bad.
Okay. All right. So, John, go ahead and pick up with the next few bullet points that you were going to
Well, you
mention
know
as far
what
as.
Marcus and SYL were talking about in terms of the presence of Antifa and Black Lives Matter. That's been their presence at peaceful rallies on behalf of conservatives has been
Yeah.
one of the greatest failings of law enforcement this past year. So
Okay.
anyone who's been watching TV or been present, you've watched cities burned. You've heard about people who were murdered.
Yep.
You've been able to watch looters destroy property, even in black-owned areas, and in the background
Destroy
you
this
can see
country.
law enforcement standing by idly. Now, here in California, when you're a graduate of California Post, Post is
Right.
an acronym for Police Officer Standards and Training. When you're at the academy and you're going through your workbooks and working with your instructors, the first couple learning modules have to do with what it is to be an exceptional or exemplary police officer. You spend quite a bit of time on ethics and accountability and working with the community. It's kind of drilled into your head that you're here to protect people and property. And it seems like law enforcement in the liberal cities have gotten way far away from the core principles of what they had learned in the academy in terms of protecting people and property. So when you see law enforcement allow Black Lives Matter or Antifa burn cities to the ground, they are in
Right.
violation of their state uh, post
Well, they're in
training.
violation of the Constitution. That's exactly what I was
They
yelling out there in the streets.
yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
hmm And no one is really holding them accountable. And if I can give a quick cheat sheet, what I would suggest is, let's say, Zavi, you were going to plan a get together, within the jurisdiction of Beverly Hills PD or
Okay.
LAPD next couple of weeks.
All right.
I would treat it like a special event or security operation. And
Gotcha.
so when you draw law enforcement into the planning of this engagement, it
Right.
lessens the opportunity for a rogue commander or command staff on site who are meeting for
Right.
the first time at the assembly. It
Right.
limits their ability to fuck with you, quite honestly, forgive my language. And so
Yep.
when you file an operational plan in advance where you've noted for law enforcement that you intend to engage in a peaceful assembly and you utilize the penal code statute for
Right.
what constitutes an unlawful assembly, you're letting law enforcement know in advance that you and the other people assembled intend to abide by the law. It also lets them know that they can't use the unlawful assembly penal code unlawfully in an effort to shut you down in an arbitrary and capricious manner. I would also indicate in a general paragraph in the writing of this operational plan that you understand that local law enforcement are bound by these California penal codes. They're bound
Uh-huh.
by these federal codes, and another federal code is 18 USC 241, which is interesting. Conspiracy against rights. What is that? That is when two or more officers conspire to deny a citizen their constitutional safeguard. So there are a whole host, and then there's basically 42 USC 1983. That's the
Okay.
civil liability that allows a citizen to sue the department and the officer. So when command staff knows in advance, whether they think you're an attorney or not, when they know in advance that they're going to be scrutinized for their performance while they're
Right.
protecting you and protecting property during this lawful assembly,
Right.
you find that it's going to go a lot smoother. I would also include the cell phone numbers and email addresses of the relevant leaders so that law enforcement can contact you during the assembly to address any issues that might otherwise give rise to a 911 call regarding a noise complaint or whatever. In other words, if you regard them as an adversary, bring the adversary in to join your team in advance
Right.
so that while you're there during this lawful assembly, you already have contact with a senior lead officer who could be standing alongside you. And what this does do, it puts law enforcement on notice in advance that they too are being held accountable. What is happening now is that people are unaware that there are policy manuals, they're unaware that there are penal codes, that there are federal statutes that make law enforcement accountable. And by being unaware of how to articulate their constitutional
Right.
safeguards, they're kind of contributing to their own demise. So, for example, filming. You
Right.
you've seen those videos where people have been lawfully filming their interaction
Mhm.
with law enforcement, and law enforcement shuts
Right.
them down. Well,
Uh-huh.
the people understand that they have a First Amendment right to film. They don't know how to articulate it in a way that's going to grab the attention of law enforcement. So, for example, let's say you were being contacted. A contact is a legal term here in California for when law enforcement makes contact with you. Okay,
Right.
you're being contacted, and let's say your girlfriend decides she wants to film this encounter. And the officer turns to her and says, "Hey, listen, put that away, okay, or I'm going to arrest you for obstruction of justice, okay, or impeding the performance of my duties." The
Sure.
way to circumvent that is to say, "Hey, officer, first of all, thank you for your presence here today. Officer, in keeping with case law, use the term case law because that will paralyze them." Although the Supreme Court has not ruled on the use of video or
So
filming and
stop right there,
interaction.
John. Stop right
What's
there.
that?
So the
Yeah.
first thing that you said is and this and I know this because I've studied from you. You've mentored me throughout the years. This is a guy who sets the tone every single time, whether it be escorting whomever in a security, uh, setting or interacting with law enforcement. It's always, hey man, thank you for X, Y, and Z. So that sets the tone, and it keeps it at a cordial state. And the other thing that John does by that is he actually maintains authority um, in a very professional manner. I've yet to to ace that all the time, that's very important. The second thing is he's speaking a language like yesterday, under penal code, under USC, yada yada yada. So now the attention is the correct way. Go ahead, John.
Well, also, Jozabi, when I teach security and law enforcement personnel how to engage people, I also indicate that, hey, listen, when you're thanking the opposing party, what you're also doing is you're establishing a baseline for evidentiary review in the event that this goes before a judge. So if the judge is reviewing the body worn video of the police officer, they're not seeing an aggressive citizen getting in the face of law enforcement. They're seeing a citizen thank law enforcement for their presence and
Right.
indicating why that, in keeping with case law, they can continue this engagement. So what I would do is thank them, say, hey, listen, officer, I'm personally a fan of Garcia versus Montgomery County Police Department, which is a case brought out of the East Coast. In keeping with case law, which affirms the citizen's right to film law enforcement during the performance of their public duties. I want to thank you for understanding that. I'm going to film our engagement for the purposes of integrity, so no
Right.
one can accuse either one of us for saying or doing something we didn't do. You know what I mean? And so, and when you take the 30 seconds to make that articulation, it really does have a paralysis effect on the part of law enforcement if they were intent on disrupting your ability to film this engagement. It also, again, it establishes a baseline for evidentiary review should this need to go up through the chain of command or end up in court, because law enforcement went and arrested you in violation of your Fourth Amendment right against illegal search and seizure. So with that, when citizens say, well, I have a right to film this, and they leave it at that, and they don't reference case law, or they don't, because case law also has its limits. And while you're
Right.
entitled to film our engagement with law enforcement, you're not entitled to impede the lawful performance of the officer. So if the filming of this engagement is such that it could be articulated as an impediment to the performance of the officer's duties, the best way to circumvent that is to add or end the articulation with officer. And while I'm filming this engagement, I want you to know that I'm aware that I don't want to do anything to impede your performance. So whether you want me to stand here, stand there, what I'm going to comply with your lawful request to have me maintain an appropriate distance, then you've given law enforcement no opportunity to stop you from filming that engagement. You've also going to be limiting their ability to seize the camera from you. The courts have indicated, again, the key term is case law. The courts have indicated that officers can provocatively threaten to seize the camera if a citizen didn't cease filming, and the courts have regarded that as a chilling effect on the First Amendment right of expression, because seizing a camera is going to be an illegal seizure in the absence of probable cause. And all the officer can do, if he's poorly trained or unethical or not supervised, all they can do once they seize your camera, they're going to have to dummy up a report, because that's a seizure of non-drug evidence. So
Okay.
when an officer makes a miscue or a misstep,
Yeah.
it's like telling a lie. When you tell a lie, you've got to tell more lies to support the
Right.
initial
Right.
lie.
Exactly. Right.
When officers engage in miscues, they've got to continue that pattern of miscues in an effort to support themselves. Now, again, don't try,
Hey,
even if you are an attorney. Oh, sorry, you
Go
want to
ahead.
go?
oh, sorry. Can you
Go,
hear
go ahead.
me?
Yep.
No. I'm sorry. Our phones, Marcus and our phones are getting ready to die. So I just wanted
Oh,
to, let you guys know, because I enjoy the
both
conversation, but I don't want
phones
my
at the
phone.
same
We don't
time.
got. Mine's
We don't have
mine's
no.
is going
Listen,
easy.
I'm glad
Okay.
you told us, okay? We didn't want to think that Black Lives Matter Antifa grabbed your phone,
Yeah. Right.
illegally while you were there. So your
No,
safety
yeah,
is our
that's why I'm
primary
like,
concern.
No, I appreciate it. So, hey, just as a quick recap here, learning the correct verbiage is a big deal. Setting the tone with a quick thank you and recognizing their position as opposed to yours. You're within the situation. It might be a protest. Each ordinance has a right to go ahead and regulate within within First Amendment. Sometimes you only have a 500 capacity, sometimes 75 capacity as far as the ordinance. So knowing that is half the battle. And so we're digging into just knowing the right verbiage to use so you get their attention, and understanding that there is a court case going on before you actually get there. That's why we use those words to get their attention. Real quick, so John, you mentioned three of the USC codes, and then there was a fourth one that I want you to mention real quick so I can put it up on the board.
Well, you're probably referring to 42 USC 14141, which is a police misconduct statute. And so typically, if you're going to go with the 242 1983 civil suit, you're also going to include the 42 USC 14141 police misconduct statute. And the important thing to remember is that, let's say, God forbid, you are taken into custody during a lawful assembly. it's very important that you immediately get an attorney, because what you're going to be looking at in terms of local charges will be probably charged with disrupting the peace. You're going to be probably charged with unlawful assembly. If you've had any type of physical interaction with law enforcement, you're probably charged with resisting arrest. You need to get an attorney right away, because what that attorney is going to have to do, and even a lot of attorneys don't even know this, under the rules of discovery in California, that attorney needs to reach out to the city attorney's office or the district attorney's office. And under the rules regarding discovery, they need to make a discovery request regarding everything pertaining to your arrest. You want the
Okay,
reports.
cool.
Mhm.
So just real quick before if their phones die.
Thank you. You
Uh,
too.
so Marcus and Miss SYL, with all that being said, um, we haven't experienced anything like that in the streets thus far. Do you think that you guys know anybody that you would be able to share these bullet points with, just among friends, among people in your space, to where they would actually appreciate it?
I think it's more so for me, it's the media, me reaching out more so at the media and just trying to get, them to understand the seriousness of what's going on. But I just think it's about, that's why I enjoy recording stuff and just kind of like having people aware of what's going on.
Right.
So when I had recorded the live from the Proud Boys versus Antifa, that was like my title. And everybody joined in and was like, what's going on? Where this is at? Like a lot of people are unaware of actually what's going on. So I just think it's more so opening everyone's eyes as much as you can. So that's just how I do my yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
totally get
That's
that,
just
but
kind of
but
how
just
I get to people.
okay, cool. And so, in specific order to what John was just mentioning in terms of the USC codes, do you think that you guys would be able to share that with somebody within your circle of friends or family, to where that would be something that not only would they would appreciate, but they would practice?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right,
Yeah.
because what's the point of talking about stuff if we're actually not applying it? And that's the second part of this,
Yeah.
as far as learning how to fight smarter rather than harder. I know I don't want the show to go too long, and so what I wanted to kind of finish with is we're heading in a major cultural shift right now. That's some of the bullet points I mentioned before. That's what the FBI would most likely be looking to investigate as far as color of authority. And so we're definitely in a major cultural shift right now. Knowing how to fight smarter is definitely important. We don't want a reform as much as we do accountability. But how can you have accountability if you don't know what the accountability rules are?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so and there's a
Accountability is absolutely.
and it's like I say, there's a big difference between killing and murdering. You don't have to murder anybody, but sometimes you got self-defense, and that's what this falls in line with, as far as being able to defend yourself. And so I don't know exactly how this will all lay out. I still think that things are looking pretty good overall, as far as Trump coming through. Talk about a existential threat. This is crisis, rather. This is exactly what we're going through right now.
Take care.
And so we got you guys in the East Coast right now. We're out here in the West Coast dealing with the same thing. John, I put up the bullet points real quick again, just for everybody to see. What's the last thing that you want to go ahead and share with the audience, just so they can take that as a okay?
Well,
now I get it.
Yeah, I want to share with the audience that we love law enforcement, and I hate that we even have to address the issue of holding law enforcement accountable. They are being used as an enforcement wing for the liberal governors and liberal mayors in liberal cities to shut down the voice of true conservatives. And we're not like Black Lives Matter or Antifa, who hate police, want funded one part of our lives. We actually love law enforcement. What we want to do is maybe, in a way, give law enforcement a greater opportunity to perform their professional duty in a way that doesn't, if they know that we understand that they are held accountable, it actually takes the burden off their shoulders. Why? Because if they know that they could be subjected to legal ramifications by not exercising their duties in a professional manner, then they're going to do so. And if they were under the thumb of a liberal chief or liberal mayor that told them to shut down this lawful assembly, they would say, hey, listen, we can't, because listen, you're going to get us all fired or you're going to get us incarcerated. So we're actually helping law enforcement
There you go.
remain free of the undue pressure exerted on them by the command staff by letting them know in advance that we know the standards that they are bound by. So we're actually helping them.
Okay, so that's a great point to end on. And so it behooves us to go ahead and learn a little, just not to be lawyers or attorneys, but just enough to go ahead and enable them to carry that same information back to whoever their handlers might be. Say, hey, they're talking exactly the type of language that lets us know that they know that we both know. And so,
and it'll provide for the protection of the patriots. Why? Because now they'll have, because at this point, law enforcement knows that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are coming to the events with weapons. They shouldn't be there.
Right.
That's the bottom line. It actually will force law enforcement to segregate, and I know segregation is a bad word, but segregation, the meaning of segregation means to separate. It will allow law enforcement to segregate Antifa and Black Lives Matter in terms of not allowing them to destroy the lawful assembly of our citizens and destroy our cities, And listen, if you show up at a lawful assembly with a weapon or a pickaxe or whatever, you need to go to jail.
Well, hey, let's go ahead and close out on that. I appreciate all you guys' time. Please be safe out there. And in the meantime, be safe. God bless. And I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Let's go!